doing this sort of impromptu episode today because we were planning on doing it outside and it started raining on us. We were out, and it's an idea that has come up, in the last couple of episodes. It's been pretty interesting to hear, like, whether we need to always be on social media, and like taking a break's okay, and sometimes that's all about this idea, and you'd kind of laid the groundwork for why we're doing this episode on authenticity, because you really felt the value, especially, last week with Jess. So if you haven't listened to the Jess Dalladay episode, it was powerful stuff.
It's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, lots of good productivity tips and
very practical.
And wellness, very practical. So check that out. But the one thing that you found very relieving was the idea of, like, you don't always have to, like, force this on authenticity in, like, the social media streams, essentially. And you'll be okay. Your business will be okay. And it's not the end of the world. Yeah. And that was, it was a huge, it was really cool to hear, because Jess has a really strong following on social media. And we all just think that requires, like, this constant curation of it to keep it going, to keep the engine running. But as she said, she took a break, and I don't think she actually mentioned how long exactly, but it was a long break.
Did she say a month? It might have been a month.
It might have been a month.
It was somewhere around there. Yeah. Which
is it is a good hiatus from like a popular page.
Business,
And like especially when people are used to, like, a regular posting schedule, when you disappear, that's when people start to say, "Are you still alive? Where are you? What happened? Is everything okay?" And more often than not, like, everything is more than okay, because you're taking that break and recharging or just sort of unplugging for a while, which we do talk a lot about as well with the ideas of digital minimalism. So what are your thoughts on this authenticity idea? And we kind of, like, talk about it a lot behind the scenes, and now it's time to bring it to light a little bit.
Bring it to the salt lamp. There no, this is a pretty real and relevant topic in my life right now, and I'm definitely experimenting with how I feel towards social media and just the idea of being really authentic on social media. So it's been fun to hear. Even just like our podcast about introversion, I think I don't know that we touched on social media, but I think that there's a lot of common threads in there. But hearing Jess, who is essentially, her business is online, like social media platforms are what's keeping her alive. To hear that she just wasn't feeling good or inspired about her current pace, hearing that she took a break just gave me a minute. I was like, oh, okay. Because if anyone watched that podcast or listened to the podcast, I was pretty quiet for the first bit. And part of that was because I was, like, taking in all of her stuff. But another part of it was, like, I was in a bit of a rut that day, and I was feeling really uninspired. And I was feeling really, like, I don't really want to put myself out right now. And so that was translating to my social media content too. Like, I didn't want to post at that moment for the past couple of weeks. And I was trying and I was trying to force it. I was trying to, like, I was like, you haven't done content in a while. Like, do something, like, just let the people know you're still here. And, like, what if you're, I don't know, missing out on client gains, or all these things were going through my head. And then she said she took a break, and I was like, that's what I need. That's what I need. And it was the best thing she did, because she filled herself back up and reminded herself of her why, and got inspired again. And then it really got fired up. And I really think that that's super important. So, I mean, I could just keep chatting about this, but my current stream is just, I'm realizing that actually going with your own flow is so beneficial. And what I mean by that is continually filling yourself up and inspiring yourself so that you can give out. And that, to me right now, is my social media schedule. Because you see all these like media agencies, no offense to the recent ones we've had, they're great. But here's your posting schedule, and you have like all these posts go up on these days at these times, and here's the most advantageous analytics and whatever. And that's really great. Right now for me, what I am subscribing to is just making sure that I take care of myself enough to feel regularly inspired and regularly full. And that's what's giving me content. And that content, and if we're talking analytics, is giving me the most responses. When I just pour my heart out because I feel inspired, and it's something that I've actively done. Like my most recent post was about, or maybe 2 posts ago, was about my most recent therapy session. And people loved it because it was just me being honest about my conversation I had between my mind and my body. And that's the kind of authenticity that I want to provide for people, is just realness in my own life. Because when I was feeling in that uninspired rut, I tried to make a post. I forced my authenticity, I will say. And what I mean by that is like the content wasn't inauthentic.
Okay.
It was the stuff that I do. Like it was a flow of animal flow that I was doing, and I was trying to make a post just saying like, here's how I do it, and here's how I incorporate mindfulness and dance and all these things that really mean a lot to my heart. But my intention for posting that was to have content out. It wasn't because I was inspired and I wanted to share. And so that's what I mean by forced authenticity, is like, it's still real to my life.
Yeah.
But I'm forcing it out there. And that just doesn't feel quite right. That's my nutshell. Well, it's a big nutshell, but that's how I feel about it. I think that it's really important to, at least for me, it's really important for me to just share my heart. And that really, I think, as going back to like the episode with Kent, like that's the light that you share, and then that gets really like magnetic for people, and they're drawn to that.
Yeah.
So it's my marketing strategy.
no, that's great. That's like, there's so many ways that I could
take it and
go off of this, and I don't know which one to start with, because there are a couple of ideas. I think quickly I'll say, even with what Jess said, that taking a break actually, and then how it ties into a scheduled content calendar is almost like the idea of being the coach, right? Taking the step back, because like the coach or the leader on the army leader, I forget, like the colonel or the general or the sergeant, whatever, they're not always on the front lines, because then you can't see the big picture. And that's what I think a lot of business people talk about as well. In your business perspective, is as the leader, you got to take that step back and see the big picture. Because if you're always in the front lines, if you're always posting in that forced schedule, you can't see the big picture. And so when you take that break, or you take that step back, just like Jess plans out her monthly calendar, her quarterly calendar, you actually get the big picture of what you're leading towards.
Yeah. And
as you said, with the idea of this light that you're sharing, I'm currently reading The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, and it's this idea of business is actually what would be called an infinite game. There's no actual end to it.
Yeah. No.
And his thesis here is that the people or the businesses that are lasting generations is because they're going off of what he calls a just cause. So, his other book was Start With Why.
Okay.
And I know Josh is a big fan of the Start With Why idea as sort of like the core of like why you're starting a business or whatever. And he's saying like the just cause is actually a little bit of an even bigger picture than that, but it's something that's infinite. Like it goes on forever. So if it's something to do with, that authentically you, that's kind of at the key to how you're going to go about continuing forever, instead of just looking at like that quarter and if you're making a profit or whatever it is. And I haven't finished the book, so I'm sure we'll go into more of those ideas later, but that's just like something that I see connecting to this is that just cause is like that light that you want to shine. And if you're forcing authenticity, or if you're kind of doing things at that like front line without taking a step back and looking at the big picture, does your content match what you're trying to do with that bigger picture? Then that's where sort of issues can start to arise, whether it's within your own psyche, right? Like if it's gonna
I think that's when you burn out.
Like burnout and just starting to maybe lose a little bit of the inspiration because it's not really fulfilling you. You're just trying to fill a role for other people instead of yourself, maybe. And looking at some of the biggest channels, well, Instagram first and foremost is very popular for photographers, right? It's for really like showcasing your best work in a lot of ways. And people have gotten really interesting with how they manage to do that, whether it's coaching specific movement cues for athletes and physiotherapy, or
shout out to Pulse,
or really nice food pictures and the coinciding recipe, ingredient list and all that, or sharing like your ideas, or even like the Gary Vee idea of putting out a lot of stuff but still showing that authenticity in what you're saying is very consistent, right? But I think and what I see kind of being like a pretty interesting point with Instagram in particular are all those photographers. They don't post daily. They sometimes post once, twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week.
Yeah.
That's usually the max if you kind of look through like how regular their posts are. Yeah. And it's very deliberate that it's authentically their best work. Instead of every single day they're posting something, because a photographer doesn't get like their best work on a daily basis. No. Right. And if even if they're like editing a photo, because some people are very creative with, they kind of incorporate some of that like hand drawn stuff in their photos and everything. That stuff can take like a full day or 2 days sometimes to really tie into what your sort of creative niche is. And it doesn't, so you can't do it every single day unless you're going to work around the clock and then lead to burnout again.
Exactly.
And start to have to force stuff out that's not like deep and dear to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it's really important to realize that like, I'm picturing an iceberg right now, and just in the sense that like an authentic post is just the tip of the iceberg. If you like when you're talking this photography, they've done so much work. Yeah. Like location scouting, if it's like landscape photography or whatever, getting things set up, taking the photo, editing the photo, making like and feeling inspired. It's all art in its own way, like whatever you're posting. And then what you see is just that photo. And this is, we can get into that of people just posting the highlight reel and thinking life is all hunky-dory and wonderful. But it's just the tip of the iceberg. And if you're throwing out photos every day, every minute kind of thing, it's a little bit careless, in my opinion, at least from me. Like, I don't have the capacity to throw out photos all the time. And I don't have the content to throw out photos all the time because I'm doing other things. Yeah. But if I'm just snapping things carelessly and not worrying about how fine-tuned they are, how fine-crafted they are, to me, that just even shows not being authentic, Yeah. And I think people, because you're only seeing that one product, you're not realizing how much work, unless you have an eye for that and you have a respect for that, or you know the person and how much work they've put into it. Yeah. You don't really know. But where the authenticity comes in is either through the caption or the art of the photo. When it really inspires you, you look at that and you're like, oh, yeah. Like, that's the work that's coming through. That's the light that's coming through that. And that, to me, is really important. Like, you can look at a photo or a post or whatever, and at least I can, and I like to think people can too, but you can feel the heart that comes through it if it's real. Like it inspires you. You want to click the little save button and like go back to it, or you just can't stop looking at it because it's like, oh man, there's been like so much authenticity put into this. There's been so much light. There's so much heart put into this. This is real.
Yeah.
That's the good stuff. Right. And so I don't think you can rush it. I don't think you can force it. Something that I said in the Introvert podcast, I think this quote made it in, was just the idea that if you're always working from a place of empty, the only thing you're committing to is your own burnout. And so if you're always just posting for content, posting just to get something out there, I would argue that's a place of empty because you don't feel full and inspired. You're just like, I just got to do it. And you're just slowly chipping away at being exhausted.
Yeah.
And losing, like you said, losing your why and losing that inspiration. And that's going to fizzle pretty quickly. And your business, if this is what you're posting towards, like you're going to forget why you're doing it, and you're going to just not want to do it anymore. And then you grow bitter and resentful. And that's all I got. That's it. Good. My brain just stopped.
No, it's good. How do you then work from a place of authenticity?
I'll speak personally because I don't know.
Yeah, or if somebody even getting started, like they might not know what that even means.
Fair. I mean, broken record, but self-awareness. I say this every podcast for people who don't want or listen regularly, but you got to know yourself, and you got to know what inspires you, and you have to establish your why. And I would say, like, don't start posting right away. Okay. In my opinion, I think, fine wine takes time.
I have a little bit of a different idea about this.
Interesting. But go on. I like it. I think just that you need to fill yourself up first so that you can give. At least that's my model. And doing things that constantly feed you. So what's been working for me is just making sure that I take care of myself, because that's the kind of content that I put out is kind of self-care and movement and taking care of your body and your mind all together. And so I have to actually do that. I have to live that in order to give that to people.
Totally.
Otherwise, it's just not real, right? It's not authentic because I'm not actually doing it. And so I make sure that I'm going to therapy regularly, because that's where I really sort out my mind and my mindfulness and kind of come back down. I make sure that I work out regularly. I make sure that I do things that put me in the flow state regularly. And I don't force it, because you can't force it. Right. You just got to live an authentic life and do things that feed you, do things that are on brand with your passion and your heart and your own true desires, and not try to be someone else. Yeah. But what are your ideas?
Yeah, so my idea, it is a little bit different. So the other book that I just finished is Creative Calling by Chase Jarvis, and he's a world-known photographer, and this book's really great on how to build the habit of creativity. And that's essentially like his main point. So I think lack of authenticity often comes from people maybe believing that they're not creative. And so sometimes, I don't know, sometimes we see it. We sometimes gripe about this. There's some blatant inauthenticity, especially on social media, and it's don't really know what to do about it other than say that kind of like real recognize real. We know that it's not true to the heart, or it's just like copying somebody else's I guess just cause or why or whatever. Yeah. It's copying somebody else's
just plain rude, in my opinion.
Yeah. So actually something that Chase Jarvis recommends, and I think I agree with it, is his idea is make it till you make it. So
that's cool.
You kind of hear like the fake it till you make it.
Yeah, stop that.
But his thing is make it till you make it. So if you're starting out in something that you perhaps have a passion towards, and we've mentioned this many times before, but you've got to try a bunch of things to develop that self-awareness on what you actually like. Yep. And so Chase's idea is it's okay for a little while to like copy other people's styles of whether it's photos or
See what feels right.
or video editing, whatever it is. I don't think like you should copy them word for word if you're writing or if you're trying to speak. You may kind of inherit a little of the mannerisms if you really like somebody, but I think part of the make it till you make it is also you're not supposed to stick to copying somebody else blatantly for a long time.
Right.
You're supposed to try it and see if it works for you and then adapt it to like what is more like in your heart. So I think it's okay to get started with when you still don't know exactly what your sort of why or what is your light. It's okay to get started as long as you're self-aware enough to evolve it until it is actually like crystallized as what's yours.
That's cool. I like that. What was I gonna say? This is fun. My brain just shut off.
Oh,
I guess that's it for me. That's
okay. I think I think like we wanted some actionable advice from this authenticity thing, and we definitely we talked about what the issues with being fake or being inauthentic are, and so it's okay to get started, and everybody gets started. It's that imposter syndrome idea again too. Everybody getting started feels a little bit like a fraud because you haven't figured it all out, but make it till you make it. And that's part of the getting a creative habit, because Chase essentially in Creative Calling says that everybody's got creativity. It's not like it's something exclusive to the artsy folks or anything. We heard that like Jess is from a pure science background.
Think she's creative. My goodness, take a scroll through her Instagram. I think she's wild.
Yeah, and so it's just trying things. Until something actually sticks that resonates with you.
I know what I was going to say now, and it rides off of this. Is just in order to build something real, you need to leave your expectations at the door. So if you're doing the make it till you make it technique, I like our different descriptions because I'm like dip your toes and you're like jump in. And I think that's really good for different personality types.
It is.
So regardless of what aspect or route you take towards your own authenticity, I think you need to really drop what others think of you and the response you get. If we're going to talk specifically social media, like I said, if you're posting just for the likes or the gains of clients or whatever selling, you would probably be pretty disappointed when you're dabbling and trying to find your authentic flow. Because it's not going to come pouring in right away. Unless it does, and good for you. But you need to give yourself some patience and some time to feel it out and feel what feels good and feels right and craft this really awesome crystallized thing that you're talking about. I think authenticity needs to be void of others feeding you. It just needs to be your passion. And if it's yours and it's true enough to you and it's like valuable and you share it from a place of true heart, that's when people come flooding in. And that's when you start to not really care. Jess said this in her podcast, if it's one person or 1,000 people, you don't care. You've impacted someone with your truth, and that's beautiful. Right? And so that's, I think what I'm getting at is just with this expectation thing is like, don't worry about the likes. Don't worry about the comments. Don't worry about your profile visits. That's not important right now. Like what's important is you figuring out your heart, your truth, what's going on for you, and what path you want to take. And from there, maybe we can talk about marketing strategies. But first, you got to go in.
Totally. Like I think that it's true because a lot of like that content curation is all about looking at which things are working the best. And it's interesting that you say that often, and I think we hear it a lot, is that instead of it being that banger on Instagram, as people like to call it, something that's more authentic to you gets actually the response that you're looking for as somebody trying to build a business
Just
or
as a
whatever,
byproduct.
awareness of your message, right? Yeah. So that's very cool. I don't know if I necessarily have anything else to add, because we've sort of touched on all of it. With,
no, that feels good.
Yeah.
I think it's, it's that cheesy, like, just be you kind of statement, but there's so much truth to that and so much realness to that. Like, it's so important.
Yeah. And if you are trying to build something, you may have, like, we see it with the YouTubers and everything. They've got those sponsored posts that they kind of develop it with their own artistic style, which isn't entirely inauthentic, but the best ones are also, they talk about how every other video they make or every other post is just for them. It's something that they really like, and
anyone who's made it big on YouTube especially didn't start, at least from the ones that I've listened to, they started because it was just fun. They just liked it. And that's, like, authenticity grows. Yeah. It's a real thing. Yeah.
Totally. So I think that's all I really have to say about it. We could probably go on for a long time, but it's really pretty straightforward that you can kind of go back and listen to some of the episodes, because we have a lot of authentic guests on. I think that's kind of interesting. That's hopefully something that we can continue to build, because it's great. That's the
truly inspiring stuff, is when we get people who come on and just talk about what makes them get all fired up. And it's the good stuff. So I guess my actionable advice is go figure out what gets you fired up and be patient. And, you're learning to walk, so be okay with crawling and stumbling and falling a bit, and just get back up and keep trying.
And, like, well, we just came from the top of Haroldtown Hill, and that felt very authentic, right? There's nothing like forced or fake about it, right? Because it's, if we weren't there getting some quality content too, but you would have been walking Mila there.
I just go
today
there
or tomorrow, that kind of thing.
This
anyway,
afternoon,
so
I'm going back.
It's super cool, and it that's kind of like that's the idea. You'll find your authentic things. You don't always have to I don't know, go to the top of the CN Tower and take a photo from up there, if that's not, like, something that's interesting to you or whatever.
Cool, yeah, find what feeds you and then run.
Totally. All right, we will wrap it up there, and I guess figure out who our next guest is. I was going to say,
what's going on next week?
I'm not sure yet.
I don't think we know yet.
We haven't locked it in. There's a couple ideas there, so we'll have to. We'll know by then, and
cool, done deal.
Right on.